Panel. We're going to get right into it pretty soon. Really happy that you guys could join us. Star East has been going pretty well so far, and I hope you guys are enjoying. My name is Tariq King, and I guess you've seen my face on this brochure. It's very embarrassing. Don't talk to me about it. Let's just move on from that. And today isn't about me anyway, although I'm happy to field any questions. It's really about the panelists. So let's get started. Kevin, let's move forward. All right. So as I said, I'm Tariq King. This panel is really about having an authentic experience and discussion with experts and people who have been kind of exploring the field of AI and machine learning and its intersection with software testing, right? And so they don't have any preceded questions. They don't do anything prep beforehand. I just tell them, show up, right? And you as the audience have free reign to also ask any questions. I encourage you to do so. It doesn't matter. There's no stupid questions. It's just really us trying to have open dialogue and open discussion. And I'm very excited because we do have a panel that has a variety of people, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. So that being said, there's also one extra panelist back here that we'll see who's like a close friend and buddy of mine that also has worked in this space, Kevin Powell. Kevin, can you stand up since no one can see you? But Kevin is also going to be helping us with another virtual panelist in a second that will join us, right? All right, next slide there, Kevin. So there's kind of like this broad gambit of AI for software testing. It is not one of these circles. It is all three, and all three are open for discussion here. Every time we talk about this, someone is always like, oh, how can I use AI and machine learning to have cooler automation, right? And do automated testing and make that better, right? And then as we saw this morning from the keynote, there's people who are faced with being on the floor of a project that uses AI and machine learning, and they have to kind of learn some of the methods and the techniques to actually test these systems. And then last but not least, which is very close to me because I love this topic of it, is that as we go to systems that are very adaptive, right? We see all this generative AI, all these things that can happen dynamically at runtime, and we don't know what the system has learned. Can we actually design these systems in a way that they can test themselves? Because the only way to deal with dynamic behavior is to test it at runtime. Every time we change a system, we normally would do a regression test, right? Or some sort of new testing as well on that new feature. Well, every time the machine learning adapts or learns something new, it's changing its behavior, it's changing its function. It needs testing. So how can we bring all of the work into the actual design of these systems so that when we put these systems in production, they can actually observe and test themselves? So all these are three topics that are part of this panel. And feel free to ask questions along those lines. All right, next one, Kevin. Cool. So I'm very happy to have Shivani Gaba. Y'all just know Shivani. Like if you missed that keynote, you missed a great thing, a great part of your life. Go back and watch it, right? I was very, very excited. Not trying to embarrass you, Shivani, but it was a great keynote. And from the perspective of someone who's been kind of thrown in the midst of this and kind of giving their experience. Diony Santiago. Diony, again, has also worked in this. Diony had a tutorial on Monday for those of you who may have been here, and it was an introduction to using AI for test automation, which is pretty cool. And David, who's my new friend, David had a wonderful talk yesterday on machine learning, and he gave some real practical examples, right? And I will definitely get into that. And fun fact about David, he used to be a psychologist. So understand that he is probably one step ahead of us whenever we are asking him questions, right? Yeah. So, all right, that being said, I think the first thing I want to do is kind of get everyone to kind of just introduce themselves, starting with you, Shivani, and just a little bit about I know you just shared your story, but for those who may not have seen it or for a virtual world, just make sure you tell a little bit about how you got involved in AI machine learning. And then we'll go to Diani and then David.
Cool. Thank you. So hello, I'm Shivani, as Tariq already said. I was known as Shivani Gaba until now, but now people are calling me the girl with pink shoes and pink top. So yeah, and if you wonder why it's like this, then it's in the talk. It's my story in the talk that I'm dressed up like this in the talk pictures. The talk that I had today is actually the experience that I have in the machine learning domain. So I have been thrown into these systems of how would we test machine learnings. And that is what my expertise is. I would answer any questions related to how you could do this, how you could do that. I've worked as a tester for almost 10 years, and now I'm an engineering team lead. Thank you.
Diani?
Hey, everybody. My name is Diani Santiago. I am a pretty big QA geek. So I think that the first moment when I fell in love with testing, and particularly with test automation, was when I ran my first Selenium script more than 12 years ago. And that was extremely exciting to me, just to be able to kind of hit a button and watch the program essentially test another program and actually do it through the UI, even more exciting. And from that moment, I started thinking, will we ever get to the point where this will all happen automatically, where you don't have to write the script a priori? And that is actually what excites me the most about where we are today, and really excited to be here.
Thanks, Diani. David?
Hey, hi everyone. I'm David Dang. As you guys know, I have a psychology degree, but I actually started out IT as a mainframe developer. So just think about that. If you guys don't know what that is, it's the green screen. All right. So how did I get into AI? So in the past, I've been a consultant my whole career. In the past 5-6 years, I've been working a lot with DevOps, building pipelines and all that fun stuff, right? And one of the problem with automation or even manual testing is regression is huge, right? So on my current project right now, what I'm trying to do is leveraging machine learning so that we can kind of make the suite really tight and really small, right? So that we can test faster, basically. So I'm building a machine learning engine that basically go out and look at analytic, look at tagging for code and all that fun stuff, and basically allow us to say, instead of 2,000 regression tests, if you run this 100 tests, you will find more defects. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, David. All right, so how are we going to roll this in a second? And Kevin is behind me. So Kevin, let me just get you to come out here. This is going to be embarrassing, sorry. But tell us a little bit about yourself. This is Kevin Piles, and how you got into AI as well.
I'm the man in the chair. I'm not supposed to be seen. So Kevin Piles, I got started in AI for testing specifically a while ago because there was a presentation given here at Star East. This crazy man named Jason Arbon gave a presentation, and I decided that's the future. We're going to move in that direction. And so ever since then, I've been looking at how AI can affect testing and everything else. And we're all seeing it. And that's what the panel's here for, is to talk about that and see where we're going. There you go.
Cool. So Kevin is also going to help us have our virtual attendee, which is going to be ChatGPT, right? But before we kind of launch chat as well, these are the topic areas, right? Any ideas around AI for testing, any challenges, any solutions, right? Any questions in any of those areas, I want you as an audience to feel free to engage. So I will ask one question to our panelists, and they can feel free to answer. And then we will get chat up and running, and then I'll open it to the floor for y'all to get your questions answered. And if your question is directed at a particular person, that's fine. Feel free to direct it that way. If it's just a general question that you want to hear the panelists' thoughts on, feel free to do that as well, right? Or if you have something for me, please feel free to do so. All right. So, Kevin, let me just help you here. So you can click out of that. Just go to chat.openai.com. All right. So my question for the panelists is really one around where do you see the future of AI machine learning in the context of testing? Like, we know where we are right now, and there seems to be a lot of hype and a lot of buzz around things. Where do you see this all going? Like, what is the next step now that we have things like large language models, now that we have AI machine learning embedded in almost every device known to us, right, in every application? Where do we go next, right, as a testing community with this technology? Anyone jump in?
I go. What I see is with machine learning and AI, I think we're going to capture a lot more data, right? Because for machine learning to work, you need as much data as possible. So what that means, instead in the past, you know how we run tests and we just say, all right, it passed, it fell, done, right? What I see is a lot more of analyzing the data, getting the data to tell us what it's really happening versus, oh yeah, I think that's an error or I think that's a defect, right? It's actually being able to have real information that we can analyze, right? And we can build algorithm and models so that we can make sense of it, right? And make it a lot more efficient. Think about it. I mean, your QA team, how much time is spent for you guys to do automated testing, manual testing? One of the statistics is that 70% of your application is never used. But what do? We test to what? Everything, right? Because we're so afraid of missing something, right? Oh my God, we're QA, we missed something. It's in production, it's our fault. We can't sleep at night, right? That's really not what we want to get to. We want to get to a point where we're testing exactly what's going to go wrong. So for me, AI, machine learning, data. Get as much data as you want.
All right.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What are the sources of data you want? Is QA data sufficient?
Ooh, no.
So one second,
No.
let's make sure we repeat the question.
No.
So the question was, what are the sources of data do you want? Is it QA data or other sources of data?
The project I'm working on, I'm collecting development, like tagging line of code, almost, all right? Of course, testing data, right? Pass, fail, production defect problems, okay? Analytic, okay? If you have Google Analytic, New Relic Analytic, all that stuff, usage, absolutely. Like I said, 70% is not used. We're testing to 100%, right? So basically, if you just concentrate on QA data, then you are looking at a very minute part of the big thing, right? So being able to correlate all those data together and build a machine learning engine on top of it will give you tons of value.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think we have a question.
Sure.
So when we talk about a lot of data, right, that also brings the problem of privacy or even the criticality of the data to some company and the sensitivity of the data, right? So if you're building a AI software right now to help a lot of companies, how are you going to be able to prevent that if company A or company B doesn't really want to get data to come to your system or even to be exposed to anything else?
Yeah. So question is related to, we want to use a lot of data to train these systems, but it brings up the issue of data privacy. And how do we really start to address the problem of companies who have their private data, or even individuals that have that private data there stored and not wanting to send that or communicate that over the wire to a third party organization to hopefully use that data to train the system. But we also know that opens up a whole other can of worms. Thoughts on that?
I have thoughts on your question.
All right, so I'll give my thought. I'll give my thoughts on that. So the other day, so number one, this legal. Remember, we can ask ChatGPT. So don't ask Chat yet, right? I'm not saying I need to ask Chat to answer the question, but we will ask Chat to see if I'm making any kind of sense here, right? First thing, one of the biggest things that we're seeing with clients who actually are coming to us and wanting to apply this technology is the legal hurdle, right, of using this thing, right? And a great analogy came up the other day, right, especially in thinking about, well, when will this technology be enterprise ready, right? Because there's open AI. We know that the kind of one space where this is kind of enterprise ready is with Azure OpenAI, right? Microsoft. And then, someone was asking the question, well, like, what if Microsoft, like, you're sending these things to Microsoft or OpenAI and they start to like, use your stuff and then someone brought up a very good point, which is like, well, do you use Microsoft Office? Like, do you use Google Docs, right? Any of these large organizations already, number one, they already have your data because you're already saving and storing all types of data on these systems that they have been providing to you, right? And it was not to scare you, like, oh yeah, they already have us, right? No, the risk to them of these kind of breaches and these kind of security issues to their reputation, to their business, over the LLM versus even over everything else, like it all falls into that bucket. So the key there is, I think, number one, you want to have a trusted partner in this journey, right? And if you have a large enough organization that is already trusted, that they have a huge reputation on the line, they have a huge business, that they don't want to risk having these types of issues. Whenever it happens, whenever, I got to mention Facebook, whenever there's some sort of issue around privacy, those companies take a hard hit, right? So I think the answer to this is that eventually those things will iron themselves out as we take this technology and it matures and it becomes something that all of these providers, these very large enterprise company providers that are trusted, start to do. But any other thoughts on that? And Kevin, you got to mirror the screen and just ask chat to see if I missed anything. Any other questions or thoughts on that?
I always have a thought. Though. That's the problem.
1 second. Don't switch yet. Hold on. One thing I wanted to share. So this morning, just so you know that I had permission, this morning I asked ChatGPT if they would, kind of join in on this panel. And you'll see, I said later today I'm having a panel on AI for testing. Right? Scroll, Kevin. You can see, like, said, of course, I'd be happy to help you. And it started telling me all sorts of points of using AI in testing, which is not what my request was, right? But nonetheless, and I said, no, I meant, would you actually serve on the panel, right? And so, Kevin, you're going to have to type stuff into this chat because the history, right? Like, anyway, no, and I said, I was like, can't physically attend, right? But what do you mean can't physically attend? Like, you're digital, right? So I was thinking, yes, I could display and mirror your results on the screen, just like I'm talking to you now. And then I got full agreement. Feel free to ask questions and, chat is in. All right. So Kevin, like you can only ask questions here. Don't go to my history over here. Like, you don't want to show these people what I ask ChatGPT on a regular basis, especially not my manager. He's not here right now. All right. Any other questions? Okay, here we go. Yeah, so let me just repeat the question. First, she mentioned that she attended Diani's session, and it was great. Good job, Diani. Like, good kudos to you on that. And that she got some ideas around leveraging open source tools and frameworks that could help with, using AI for testing or training models, et cetera. And if by pulling those in and bringing them on premise, if there's any risks around, using this technology. And I would say, like, on premise and open source, like, well, number one, from my perspective, there's always risk, right? But number two, like we've been seeing, like, yes, people actually want to have their own on-premise models. That is possible. However, my initial thought on something like a large language model is that to train one from scratch really costs a lot of money, right? And it's not that it's not possible to fine-tune one, and we can talk about those things, but to train one from scratch, I mean, you're training on data from all over the internet. But any thoughts on the feasibility there?
Yeah, I have one thought on that. So I think one thing that's really interesting is we have laws like GDPR and CCPA And so, sure, you can take an open source LLM implementation and train your own version of ChatGPT. It's very expensive for sure, but you potentially can start to run into problems where the training data that you use to train these LLMs, how do you then respond if some of that training data has PII or something like that, right? How do you cleanse that data to prevent PII getting into that model? Because it's very difficult to respond to a GDPR or a data cleansing request if it's in the bowels, if you will, of this very large network, right? So it's something to think about. If you're going to be training these kinds of systems, you have to really, really think about what data are you using to train these systems, right?
Question on that. For multi-tenant data sources, is there a way to take some of these models and say, okay, for this customer, I'm going to train that OpenAI or my ChatGPT with that customer's data with their consent, right? So if there is PII, PHI, sensitive data, private data,
Gianni,
at least
repeat the question.
isolating from one customer to another.
Yeah, so the question is on multi-tenancy and whether, just general question around whether we can use data from a specific tenant to train a tenant-specific model as long as we have the consent of that tenant. So I think that's a very reasonable question, and probably I think it's a very reasonable approach as long as we have the consent to fine-tune a model for a specific tenant. I think that's fine. But you do need to be able to respond to essentially deleting that model if there's a request from that tenant in the future, right, to remove data.
Awesome. All right, one second. Let me just see. So I want to make sure like we got good coverage of all the participants. So Kevin, if you could scroll up. So we did ask ChatGPT about data privacy because wow, GDPR, that's okay. So we're on the right track, right? Understand relevant regulations, anonymize and pseudonymize data, perform data protection impact assessments. That's very good. Limit data collection and retention. Implement access controls and encryption, transparency and user consent, regular audits and updates, train employees and partners. Okay, cool. My friend, your next question.
Assuming we get security resolved, what do you see as the top 3 opportunities for chat and other technologies to make an impact on the business?
All right, so I'll repeat the question for the panelists. So assuming that we get security under control, what do you see as the top 3 opportunities for ChatGPT, LLMs, and other AI-driven technologies?
In general or in software testing?
Well, mainly on the impact on the business. And that could, we're focused here on software testing, but from the standpoint of time to market, and any of those questions that business is going to ask.
Yeah.
We present this to like a CEO and say, if we do this, then this will be the impact on us getting to market faster, or any of those from a business impact.
Right. So from the comment is from a business impact standpoint. So for those of us who have like products that use AI and machine learning, Shivani, you talked about your product experience. One reason that I invited Kevin as well, even though he's the man behind the scenes, is Kevin was a product owner for an AI product that was mainly for doing software testing, but at the same side, it opened up the world of AI and its kind of influence on the market and product. So Kevin, I'll get your thoughts as well, but anyone here on thoughts?
Okay. I'm going to chime in. So from a business standpoint, I'm also working with a client right now, is a banking client, right? And what they're doing is they're leveraging machine learning and AI to get the user experience. So that's one of the factors, the user experience. Like an example I gave in my talk was, every 2 weeks you log in and make sure you got paid, right? Your direct deposit, right? Every 2 weeks you log in, you get paid. Why can't machine learning see that pattern and say, next time you log in, instead of making you click 8 times to get to, you actually see that you got paid correctly, it goes straight to that page for you, right? So from a customer satisfaction standpoint, I really see that it can make the experience for the user much better. So that's one of them, right? Another one is it really gonna make us, good or bad, it's like, remember navigation comes out, right? Before that, we had to read map. Now we rely on navigation, makes our life much easier, right? So that's another aspect of it, right? Being able to have machine learning that tells us before we even know it what we need. All right. So things like that, where it actually, again, enhance the experience, so-called.
I guess I'll go next. So the same thing that you're talking about where it enhances it, I call it AI partnered development or features. And as we think about, rather than will AI take over this area, how can I partner with AI to enhance this or improve it or make it better or do something that I just don't have time to do?
Yep.
I can't review 2,000 test cases and decide which 100 are the best to run.
Yep.
Instead, I could run an algorithm that will tell me which 100 to run. And then I say, yep, those are the right 100. Okay, now AI, go take over and run those 100. And then give me results. Tell me what you think I should do about it. But then using my intelligence, I will decide what should really be done for our product, for our customers.
Yeah.
In your opinion, from a software testing perspective, what promises of AI are overblown, and what promises will actually lead to real value?
All right. So repeating question: what promises of AI are overblown, and what promises of AI bring real value?
It will solve world hunger. Sorry.
Oh, good. Yeah,
Microphone.
I can agree to that.
Yeah.
I also think that what AI promises, and it does very well, is to know the unknowns. So to know about the system, to know about the customers, to know about the businesses which are unknown to us right now. So to predict in that way what it promises. But what I think where it is right now, I think it's not up to there, is about, is it doing it right? We don't know it yet 100%. What is actually produced by AI, is it 100% correct or not? We are not having the surety in this, and that's what I think it's lacking right now.
Our job is safe, just to let you guys know. Let's just put it bluntly, right? As much as we market AI and machine learning and all that stuff, at the end of the day, it's a partnership, like we're saying, right? It's a partnership that basically we still need the human intelligence to validate that, you know, the prediction is right until we totally trust it, right? And I can tell you right now, that's a big trust.
So yeah, I do have a question for y'all along those lines, right? So this morning, we saw Shivani's journey through testing ML, right? And what I personally loved about it was that, like, it comes from the perspective, which I think a lot of people here might be able to relate to, that, like, we don't know what's going on in that world as testers, right? We know our product, and we know our domain, and we know testing techniques. Like, we bring a lot of things to that table, but it takes that first step into that world. And that world can kind of seem like, again, a little bit foreign to us, right? So my question is really around, you mentioned trust, and this is for all of you. How do we get there? How do we get to a point where the testing community and folks who are in organizations are actually behind and driving building trustworthy AI systems, or systems that we can rely on, systems that are performant? How do we start down that path? What is the kind of trajectory that we need to take?
I can take that. So in my opinion, I hear a lot these days about how do I use AI in testing? Like, there are a lot of questions of it. But I think one domain or one thing about impact of AI that would come to the software testing world that we are not that much talking about is, how do we get into these systems, or how do we make sure that these systems work? So what exactly Tariq asked. So first of all, it's about realizing the importance of getting into these things. Not only thinking about how do I use these systems in my current job, but thinking about, if the amount of products, AI products, would increase, how could I as a tester would be there? So first of all, it's about realizing the importance, realizing that we need to do it. And then I think it's about, as I said earlier, it's about understanding how this works, get into the depth of it, try to do it, try to find some time, even with our current projects, to explore a bit of how we can actually get into it. So understanding the basics. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I will add to that that I'm sure everybody here has used GPT, GPT-4. I think everybody here has probably run into examples where it does really well, and also run into examples where it does very poorly. And I think that therein lies the challenge, right? So we have an early model that seems to be it's revolutionary, but we don't really know if it's right or wrong, right? You need a human to actually sit there and read the responses to judge whether it's correct or incorrect. The system itself really doesn't know if it's right or wrong. And I think that we have to be really careful with systems like this, and we have to start thinking as testers, not how can we leverage something like this, but how do we make sure this is right, right? And how can we build systems or build new techniques or frameworks to help us answer the question of whether these systems are doing what we think they're doing or what they think they're doing.
Yeah.
May I just jump in and add a very interesting fact that I noticed just yesterday? So I asked ChatGPT what Danny was saying, right? So how do you see if it's right or wrong? Only human intelligence can find it. Very interesting thing happened yesterday. I asked ChatGPT 2 questions. First, were testers involved in testing you? And second, were quality assurance analysts involved in testing you? And both the answers were like, for testers, it said, no, they were not. And for QAs, it said, yes, there were domain experts QA involved in testing me. So that's the thing, what Danny mentioned. It's us who would judge if the answers are wrong or right. It's us humans who would see if the machines are working right or not. And I would actually post these 2 answers on LinkedIn today and start a thread of what people think about these answers. And I actually also then asked ChatGPT, what's the difference between a QA analyst and a tester for them?
So let me just say one thing onto the question. Number one, great question. I think that there's these base LLMs. And when I say base LLM, it means that what it really is just doing is taking text and some seeded text and generating other text, right? So, and Andrew Ng and OpenAI just opened a free course on prompt engineering. It probably won't be free for long, so check that out. I mentioned it in the tutorial that I give. But one of the things that they mentioned in there is that base LLMs, which, you know, you could ask it something like, what is a QA engineer? And it may come back with something like, what is a software engineer? What is a DevOps engineer? Because it's just trying to generate text that may fit into that model. And maybe it is trying to generate, it saw a questionnaire that had all these different questions. And so it thinks that that's what comes next in the model, right? Versus if you're training, and this is where the whole instruct model and instruct GPT comes from. If you're training and trying to train the system to kind of give you like correct answers, not just to generate text that might be in a similar realm, but give you correct answers that maybe you think a human would do, and it would be an intelligent response to that question, then there's another level there. I think understanding like which model is at play, and then recognizing the level of testing that is required for each of those models is a key aspect of like what we need to kind of start to formulate and have testing strategies and testing methodologies around. But you first have to understand, like Shivani said, you first have to get that understanding of what are these things? What are they trying to do? What is the goal? What type is it? And then from there, I mean, it's like in testing, we always know that we have to know what we're testing, right? That's like ground zero. Like, oh, test that. Well, what does it do? Right? And that is the part of it where I think we need to like kind of start to dig in to this technology. But I want to just make sure, Kevin, if you could scroll back up, because I'm pretty sure like it's really good to ask. You ask it about trustworthy AI and it tells you a whole lot, right? Establishing clear and ethical guidelines, implementing rigorous testing methodologies, at least testing is there, right? Like that's a win. Emphasizing transparency and explainability, involving diverse set of stakeholders, encouraging third-party audits and certifications, promoting responsible AI development, fostering a culture, I love this one, of continuous learning and improvement, and then regulatory compliance. So great set of answers. Yes, sir.
So I have a question in a completely different area. How, as quality people, do we work with the impacts that AI has on our software? For example, I work in an identity and access management team. We see increased people defeating our CAPTCHAs, which are maybe possibly from AI. I can see a lot of other attacks coming at us from AI-generated bots and other things. How do we prepare for that?
Yeah. So let me repeat the question, and I might botch it because it was a very good question. And technically it goes through my brain. I'm like, wow, that's blowing my mind. So question was around like, how do we as software professionals start to deal with or handle the way that AI is impacting like our roles and our day-to-day in with respect to like what we're building. And the gentleman here is in like identity controls and talking about access management. Now AI can kind of give you smarter ways of doing the wrong thing, right? Defeating your CAPTCHAs and being, I guess, misused in that respect. How do we start to deal with or handle that? And I actually don't know right now. So
that's a great question. I mean, when you asked that question, my mind was like the little hamster inside was running. And it's a tough one, right? Because if you say, pick all the traffic light, it's easily AI can come and say, oh, that's a traffic light, that's a traffic light, that's a traffic light. I know one of the company I work with, what they do is the way they are handling some of that is they are analyzing all the log that's come from the system, and they are trying to see if there's any pattern that are mismatching from your normal, right? So what I mean by that is, so let's say that an AI go out there and pick traffic light, right? They pick it too fast, or they are, you know what I'm saying? So what this company is doing, and they process like 10 terabyte of data a day just to look for pattern. And if they see any pattern that's not, too fast or clicking too, they will actually flag it as a bot, right? And actually, ask for additional verifications and stuff like that. So basically, what they're trying to do is using machine learning and AI to defeat machine learning and AI. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's a strange place. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. So I'll mention. So like that's a great point. In the context of this topic, the whole idea of adversarial networks is kind of built on this premise, right? You can have a model that is trained to do something, some task, right? Your day-to-day, what you're doing. And then you could train a model that it tries to deceive it, right? It tries to break in. And again, the whole premise of like generative, so we talk about generative AI, and most people now are about generative pre-trained transformers. They forget like one of the biggest advancements that happened before that, which was generative adversarial networks. And the idea of a GAN, or generative adversarial network, is that you do have such actors, right? You have one that's really trying to achieve some goal, and another one that's trying to deceive it or create fakes, right? A generator and a discriminator. And once you start now getting better, if the discriminator starts to get better at detecting fakes, right? Then what you can do with that information is actually like improve the whole process, right? So for example, a popular example is counterfeit money. If I'm a bank, I'm trying to detect counterfeit money. I have someone who's producing counterfeit money. As I get better at detecting that kind of counterfeit, I can now use it to improve the generator part of it, right? So that now I can now say like, okay, this is now a better model for this problem, right? But the question becomes, where does it stop? It stops when you can no longer tell the difference between the real or the fake, right? And this is already happening. There's a couple examples that we see. Like right now, we can tell that ChatGPT is a chatbot by asking it certain things. But when we first started using it and it started responding, you're like, wow, that's like something that I would have said, right? And if it kept up that, like if you didn't get into, now you get these like, as a large language model, like blah, blah, Well, of course, now you know it's a bot, right? But if you think of someone training something like that, where you can't tell the difference, now we got like a security challenge, right? Is what deep fakes and all these things are a big security challenge. Any other thoughts on that? I don't really know how to get there, but you keep working hard. Maybe you should be like picking up AI to help like on the other end, right? Like so that because the criminals are using it, right? So you definitely need to be using it, right? So
Maybe ask you.
yes, chat. No, I'm scared of that question.
So that question, does it sound like it's an arms race?
It is.
And then it matters who's beating which side.
Yeah, it is an arms race.
Yeah.
It is an arms race, and it really depends on who's going to win that battle, right? Is it good or for evil? Like, good. I don't know the answer to that one either, but it's the same thing, right? Ethical hacking, and we get into that. Seems like a lot of security stuff. Yes, sir.
So it's so much to speak about how bots like this can generate content and help us generate test cases that we saw in yesterday. Where is the boundary that becomes ethically just use it as our own submitted network?
Okay, so that's a great question. So the comment first was that like we've seen examples and talked a lot about the fact that we can use AI and machine learning to actually generate content like test cases or test artifacts and so on and so forth. And the question I think is like where's like the boundary of like like as we start to use these tools and we kind of put forward these things as our own, like where's the line there? Like, is there a clean line to separate us kind of feeling like we're being dishonest? It's kind of like all the kids now writing their essays, right? Like, I wrote this, right? Technically you did, right? You asked ChatGPT to write it for you, right? We're doing the same thing with test cases and automated scripts and so on and so forth. Where's that line? Any thoughts on that?
So I will take a stab at it. So I think this is a really good question. I think that this technology, we should actually embrace it, and we should be open and honest with our teams about the fact that we're using this technology. So that's where I would start. Hey, here's a prompt that I used. I was able to generate, 20 test cases that were extremely valuable. It saved me 2 hours of time. And the test cases were for the most part valid, right? So I would definitely, personally, would be essentially someone who would bring that to the rest of my team, right? And it's not, to me, whatever GPT can generate in terms of test cases is going to help, but it's going to lack some deep domain expertise that we as testers will be able to provide and to supplement. So I don't think that at least where we are today, I don't think that these systems are going to be able to replace our domain expertise until we get to fine-tuned GPT models. I don't know, 10 years from now, maybe less. But
might be sooner.
Might be sooner. But I think that the kernel in there in my answer is that it's okay to use these systems to save us time, but it's not going to replace the other work that we need to do. So let's put our focus on building and generating test cases, not generating, but putting together test cases that are more complex and deep in nature that these systems can't do today. And let's let these systems do what they can do today so that they can save us time and energy.
Yeah, I would also say like, how many people here use the internet to help you with your job, right? Like, you kind of, how many people use Stack Overflow? Like, we look at this technology, you know why? Because it is so easy now to kind of get the information that you want. But the way that I've been using chat a lot, and I've tried different things. I've tried a lot of stuff because I get bored. And like, I'm sure you've had like a couple hours of your life where you just were like, or maybe just me, but you have information that's out there and it kind of saves a lot of time and effort. For example, for this question, like we just asked around this question, there's a couple ways that you can kind of promote like the transparency and, I like Diony's answer, like, look, like just be open about where you got this information from, right? And in some cases, like I feel we might find more of a need to do so because it kind of felt so easy to get it that it felt like cheating. But if you spend hours on the internet looking for the same information, you put it together, you bring the report in and say, like, I worked on this report. You don't say, well, I really gathered all this information from the internet and then feel guilty about it because you still put in some work. So what I would like to see, and I think bringing the use cases to the forefront is a key part of this. Bring the use cases that work, bring the prompts that work, that have been reliable, share them. And let's remember, like, let's not waste time doing stuff that might feel like mundane. Like, yeah, let the machine kind of do that because there's so much other things we don't get to do. Let's make sure that we are using the extra time to focus on higher order cognitive things that the machine isn't doing for us right now, or that we know it might hallucinate about, right? So I just want to read these real quick. Kevin, if you could scroll back up. I think Kevin asked the right question. Is it appropriate to use content generated by AI language models like chat in our own work? Academic assignments. Whoa. Academic institutions generally require students to produce original work. So that sounds like a no. All right. Professional publications. Also, I can tell you firsthand, no. Creative works, creative writing and art, blah, blah. AI generated content without disclosing. So again, it's more about being open about where it came from. Situations requiring expertise, copyright or trademark infringement. So I think we just have to look at the boundaries where things are. And again, making sure that we're open and honest and transparent. I have never published a paper from ChatGPT under my own name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never, have never done that. It implies not yet. All right. Any other questions? How are we doing on time? We're getting there. Any other questions? Oh, you asked a question? Were you doing stuff behind my back? Oh, take it. So how many people are worried that their jobs are going to be gone? Not in this conference, right? Because we see how bad chat can also be, right? Like, sorry, so I have to share this one hallucination, which I've only shared with a handful of people. But it's very applicable because we're at a testing conference. And if Allison is listening to this, it was not for STAR conferences that I did this for, right? But there was one weekend, I sit on a lot of boards for these conferences, and there was one weekend that I got kind of overloaded, and then the kids were leaving. So I was like, oh, let me try to catch up on the reviews for this particular conference that shall remain nameless. And so, you know, I had like 50 reviews to do. And I thought, man, this is going to take the whole day. And so I started doing the reviews, and then I thought, oh, well, let's run an experiment and see if ChatGPT can actually help to review submissions from conferences, right? Stuff that you guys like submit for evaluation. So I started from number 1, and I started feeding like from the bottom of the list, number 50, up to ChatGPT one by one. So I engineered my prompt. I even used like descriptions of the criteria from the conference to make sure that like, hey, you were evaluating in the context of the theme and all these things. Like, I mean, I did some prompt engineering on this thing, right? And now I start going through mine, and I start giving, and I felt like, you know, okay, when I get there, then I can start to compare what Chat is doing. So I did 10 reviews, and I fed those to Chat one by one. And when I was done, I wanted Chat to kind of give me like a summary of what it had reviewed so far, along with the scores that it gave, right? So that now I could kind of go back in my list and see what I scored and how Chat scored these things. Well, when I asked it for the summary, which I only gave it 10 things, Chat came back with 11. And I was like, I saw a title and a score, the first entry that was not a paper that was submitted or a presentation description that was submitted. So I say, well, you know, it was only showing, I only asked it to show me the score and the title. So then I said, hey, Chat, could you show me the description? Because I was feeding these descriptions one by one. So could you show me the description of this first entry? And it came back and it showed me, for sure enough, an abstract that does not exist on my list. Title, abstract. I should have asked it who was the author. Anyway, but then I said, like, where did you get that from? And it says, oops, sorry. I'm sorry that I included like a whole talk that you did not ask me to evaluate. And I thought about this, like one thing is like Chat being wrong or whatever. Another thing is like to make up a whole entire story So make sure, my summary here is, number one, don't do what I did. But number two, like make sure that you're really validating these results, because it is generative AI and it will make up stories. All right. Got time, I think, for one more question. If not, comments. Yes, sir.
Will you be sharing the results of your chat?
Of my chat? Which one of my chats? This one. Okay. I will certainly package this up with this whole thing. Leandro is my guy behind the camera, Senor Performo. We will make sure you'll have access to all this stuff for sure. So a couple things, because I did this last. Okay, one more question here.
We see a lot of automation tools.
Mm-hmm.
I know we test ML and AI models to make sure they're accurate as quality. Tools that create tests or enhance tests. How do you ensure what's the value of these tests that's managed or created?
Okay.
Can you trust it?
Yeah. So this is a great question for Diony. I'm gonna direct it right to Diony. Let me just repeat the question. Question is like, hey, we see like a lot of AI generated test automation tools. They generate automation automatically, and the question is like, what is the value of these, and then can we trust them? So I know Diony has worked on building these types of tools, both professionally, building a platform for this, and also as part of his PhD research. So Diony.
Yep. Thank you. So yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer without actually getting into the details of it. But essentially, I will say from my experience that generational AI approaches or generative AI approaches to generating test cases is something that is feasible and is something that we're starting to see more and more. And we even saw some examples in this conference of folks using these tools to generate API tests data, right? So we can use these tools to generate not just test data, but test cases themselves. And then getting to your question, right? So how can we get to the point where we can trust these test cases? Well, it really requires the systems that we build and the tools that we build using these technologies to essentially be observable and to be explainable, right? So they need to be built with a human in the loop approach, right? Where it's not just an AI that's going off and generating test cases and running them and saying, hey, your app is great, or your app is not great. These tools need to be able to give you a report showing you precisely what were the test cases that were generated and executed, and what the result was, so that as a human, we can come in and actually give a thumbs up or a thumbs down and give feedback to these systems. So one cool thing that you may not have known is that GPT is a large language model that has a reinforcement learning system built on top of it. And that reinforcement learning system is there so that a human reviewer, the folks that helped to test the system, can actually give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the answers that are coming back. And I think that that's going to be key for any technology that is using AI for generating tests. There has to be a mechanism whereby a human can see what it is doing and can give feedback on it.
Thank you, Diony. All right, so two things, and no one move until I get these two things out. First thing, let's thank our panelists, including our shadow panelists behind there. Thank you, Shivani, Diony, David, and Kevin. So let's give them a round of applause, please. All right, second thing, which is like I had one of these panels at Star West last time with Lisette and Carlos Kidman. It was a great panel. And I forgot to tell people to fill out your evaluation forms. So in my opinion, it was great, just like this one where we had good discussions and I had 0 evaluations to tell. I told Allison, like, it did go well, like, but I had no proof. At least now I have a recording, which is great. But please, if everyone here could help me redeem myself by filling out your even people outside, come in and grab a form and evaluate, make sure that we give feedback. It's very important for us to continue to improve these sessions. I personally love these interactive sessions. And if you want to see more things like this, we as the program committee need your feedback. So please fill it out and get back to us. And let's also thank ChatGPT for its wonderful summary of many things that we would have probably forgotten. So
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That's it. Thanks, folks. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
senor.
Thank you.
And thank you to our virtual audience.